A man slammed his hand down in a quiet diner, and no one looked up. Garrett Cole noticed the one thing everyone else missed. The man's grip never left his jacket. Then he saw it. A knife, half hidden, waiting for the moment silence would make it easy. The whole room stayed still, like if no one reacted, it wouldn't become real. Garrett had lived through a moment like that before, and someone didn't make it out. He could stay seated again. No one here would blame him. But Stryker didn't move, his eyes locked, body ready, already choosing a side. And in that second, Garrett understood. This wasn't about stopping a man. It was about not walking away again, no matter what it would cost. So where are you watching from, and what did you feel after hearing this story? If it meant something to you, please like and subscribe so we can reach 1,000 and keep these stories alive. May God give you the strength to stand when it matters most. The diner sat at the edge of the highway, like something that had been forgotten, and then stubbornly refused to disappear. Morning light spread across the Wyoming snow in a flat, colorless sheet, the kind that made everything look cleaner than it really was. Inside, the air was warm, carrying the quiet smells of burnt coffee and oil that never quite left the place. A few people occupied booths without speaking much. It wasn't silence. It was the absence of anything worth saying. Garrett Cole sat alone near the window, hands wrapped loosely around a chipped ceramic mug. The coffee had gone cold 10 minutes ago, but he hadn't noticed. He rarely noticed things that didn't require action. Across from him, Stryker lay stretched along the narrow strip between the booth and the aisle. The German shepherd's body looked relaxed at a glance, but there was a tension in the shoulders, a quiet readiness that never really turned off. One ear stood straight, the other tilted slightly inward, as if it had learned long ago not to trust symmetry. Garrett glanced down at the dog for a moment. "Easy," he muttered, though nothing had happened yet. Stryker didn't move. His eyes tracked the room the way Garrett used to, without turning his head. That was when the door opened. Cold air pushed in first, sharp enough to make the waitress look up from the counter. Then the woman stepped through, brushing snow from the hem of her coat, with a controlled, efficient motion. She wasn't trying to draw attention. She didn't need to. Elena Voss moved like someone who had learned exactly how much space she needed, and refused to ask for more. Her coat was a muted gray, cut clean, falling straight to her knees. Underneath, black. Simple. Precise. Her hair rested just at her shoulders, dark and unstyled in a way that suggested intention rather than neglect. When she walked, there was a slight asymmetry to her stride. Not dramatic, not apologetic, just enough to be noticed by someone who paid attention. Garrett noticed. He also noticed that Stryker didn't react. Not a shift. Not a tightening of the jaw. Nothing. Garrett looked away. 2 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, the cold came with noise. The men who walked in didn't belong to the quiet of the place. They filled it instead, voices just a little too loud, laughter just a little too sharp. Mid-30s maybe, heavy jackets, cheap confidence. The kind of men who tested the edges of a room to see how far they could push before someone pushed back. Garrett's fingers tightened slightly around the mug. Stryker's head lifted. Just enough. The men spotted Elena almost immediately. It wasn't subtle. It never was. One of them pulled out his phone, angling it low at first, then higher. The other leaned closer, saying something Garrett couldn't quite hear, but understood anyway. Tone carried more truth than words ever did. Elena didn't look up, and she sat at the back booth, one hand resting lightly on the table, the other near her cup. Composed. contained, uninterested in the performance happening around her. The men moved closer. Too close. Garrett felt it before he thought it. The shift in distance, the imbalance. One of them stepped into her space, close enough that she would have to look up or physically move to acknowledge him. She didn't. "Hey," the man said, voice carrying just enough for the room to hear. No response. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Still nothing. The second man laughed softly behind him. The phone was up now. Recording. Garrett's jaw set. Not yet, he told himself. He had learned that voice well over the years. The one that delayed action just long enough to make inaction feel reasonable. The first man reached out, not touching, not yet, just close enough to make it clear he could. Garrett saw it then, and the flicker of metal near the man's hand, a small folding knife, half exposed, not fully opened, but not hidden either. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for someone who knew what to look for. Garrett's body made the decision before his mind caught up. He stood. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor, just enough sound to pull a few eyes toward him, not enough to stop anything. He crossed the space in 4 steps. No rush, no hesitation. "Step back," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The man turned, annoyance already forming into something uglier. "Mind your—" Garrett moved. His hand closed around the man's wrist, precise, controlled. The pressure wasn't violent. It was exact. Enough to disrupt balance. Enough to remove choice. The knife dropped against the table with a muted clink. The second man froze. Garrett guided the first man forward, down, until his weight met the edge of the booth. Not slammed, not thrown. Placed there with the kind of certainty that didn't allow resistance. "Stay," Garrett said quietly. For a second, it looked like the man might fight it. Then he didn't. The room went still. No one spoke. No one moved. At the counter, Tommy Ricks had taken a step forward, towel still in his hand. He stopped halfway, eyes flicking between Garrett and the men, calculating something that never resolved into action. Garrett released the wrist. He stepped back. Not far. Just enough. The second man grabbed his friend's arm. "We're good," he muttered, voice suddenly smaller. They left quickly. Not running. Not proud, either. The door closed behind them, and the cold slipped out with them. Silence remained. Garrett stood there a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned. Elena was already looking at him. Her expression wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was something sharper. Something that saw more than he was comfortable showing. "You didn't stand up for me," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, not accusing, not kind. Garrett didn't answer. Stryker had moved now, positioning himself between them. Not aggressive, not protective in the obvious sense. Just present. Watching. Elena's eyes flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Garrett. "You stood up," she continued, "because you knew exactly what it would feel like to sit there and do nothing." The words landed harder than they should have. Garrett felt it in his chest before he understood why. For a second, he considered saying something, denying it, deflecting. He didn't, because the truth had a way of recognizing itself, even when you didn't say it out loud. Stryker remained still, gaze steady, as if waiting for something Garrett hadn't decided yet. Garrett nodded once, not agreement, not acknowledgement, just movement. Then he turned and walked back to his booth. The coffee was still cold. The diner returned to its routine faster than it should have. Conversations resumed in fragments. Utensils found plates again. and the hum of the place filled the gaps where something real had just happened. It was the kind of recovery that didn't fix anything, just covered it. Garrett didn't look around. He sat where he had been before, one hand resting near the untouched mug, the other flat against the table as if grounding himself. Across from him, the window reflected more of the inside than the outside now. It made it easier not to think about the snow. Stryker shifted slightly, repositioning near Garrett's boots. Not restless, just adjusting. Garrett reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear once. Brief, automatic. Then he felt it. Not movement, not sound. Attention. He looked up. Elena Voss had crossed the diner without him noticing, and she stood at the edge of his booth now, close enough that most people would have said something. She didn't. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. Garrett stared at her for a moment. "You already decided to sit," he said. She did. No hesitation, no courtesy pause. Just a controlled motion into the booth opposite him, coat settling around her like it belonged there. Up close, there was less distance between what she showed and what she concealed. Her eyes were clearer, not softer, just more precise. Garrett didn't like precise. He picked up the mug, took a sip, immediately regretted it, and set it back down. "You should drink something warmer," she said. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that without being asked." Garrett's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for conversation either," he said. "No," she replied evenly. "You didn't." She didn't apologize. Stryker rose slowly and moved. Garrett expected him to shift closer to his side, maybe position himself between them again. Instead, the dog stepped around the table and sat beside Elena's leg, angled slightly toward Garrett. Not defensive. Observing. Garrett frowned. "Stryker," he said quietly. The dog didn't move. Elena noticed. Of course she did. "He's not unsure," she said. "He's choosing." Garrett didn't respond to that. Instead, he leaned back slightly, creating space without making it obvious. "What do you want?" he asked. Elena studied him, not in the way people usually did, not with curiosity or judgment. It was closer to assessment, like she was measuring something that wasn't visible yet. "You were military," she said. Garrett exhaled slowly. "That's not a question." "No," she agreed. "It's not." He shook his head once. "Doesn't matter anymore." "That's rarely true." Silence stretched for a few seconds. Not uncomfortable. Not comfortable either. Just present. "You run the garage down the road," she continued. "Cole Auto Works." Garrett's eyes flicked toward her. "You've been busy." "I've been observant." "That's not the same thing." Elena tilted her head slightly, considering that. "No," she said. "It's better." Garrett almost smiled. "Almost." "Then you already know enough," he said. "So you don't need anything from me." "That depends," she replied. "On what?" "On whether you're exactly what I think you are." Garrett's expression didn't change. "And what's that?" he asked. Elena leaned back just slightly, not retreating, just adjusting perspective. "Someone who knows how to act," she said, "and spends most of his time choosing not to." Garrett let out a quiet breath. "That's your read after 5 minutes." 7, she corrected. He looked at her then, properly this time. Not defensive, not curious, evaluating. "You don't know anything about me," he said. Elena nodded once. "That's true," she said. "But I know patterns." Stryker shifted again, lowering himself into a more relaxed position, but still facing Garrett. It was subtle. Garrett noticed. "So, this is what," he said. "You sit down with strangers and tell them who they are?" "Only the ones who make decisions without hesitation," she said, "and then regret them later." That landed. Garrett didn't show it. But something in his posture changed, just enough that someone paying attention would catch it. Elena did. "You didn't hesitate back there," she continued, nodding slightly toward the space where the confrontation had happened. "Not when it mattered." Garrett shrugged. It wasn't complicated. "No," she said. "It wasn't." She leaned forward just a fraction, her voice lowering. Not secretive, just focused. "That's what makes it rare." Garrett stared at her. "People act when there's a benefit," she said. "Or when there's an audience, or when they think they'll win." Her gaze held his. "You acted when none of that was guaranteed." Garrett looked away first. "That doesn't mean anything," he said. "It means everything," she replied. He shook his head. "You're reading too much into a moment. And you're trying very hard to make it smaller than it was." Garrett pushed his mug aside. "I stood up," he said. "That's it." "No," Elena said quietly. "That's not it." Another pause. The kind that didn't need to be filled. "You're losing the garage," she said. Garrett's eyes snapped back to her. That wasn't observation anymore. "That's not your business," he said, voice colder now. "It will be," she replied. He let out a short, humorless breath. "There it is," he said. "That's what this is." "What do you think it is?" she asked. "You're looking for something," he said. "And you think you found it." Elena didn't deny it. "I don't look for good people," she said. Garrett gave a slight nod. "Yeah, I figured that much." "I look for people who don't run," she continued. Garrett's expression hardened. "That's a mistake," he said. "Is it?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because people always run," Garrett said. "Eventually." Elena studied him for a moment. Then she asked, very simply, "And you?" Garrett didn't answer. Stryker stood. Not abruptly, not sharply. And he moved closer to Elena again, stopping just short of touching her knee. Garrett's eyes dropped to the dog. Something flickered there. Confusion, maybe. Or something he didn't want to name. Elena noticed that too. "He doesn't think you're finished," she said. Garrett looked up. "He's a dog," he replied. "No," she said. "He's a mirror." That sat between them for a moment. Garrett pushed himself up from the booth. "This is where it ends," he said. Elena didn't move. "Nothing started yet," she replied. Garrett pulled on his jacket. "Whatever you think you see," he said, "you're wrong." Elena reached for her coat, but didn't stand yet. "I don't need to be right," she said. "I just need to know if you're still capable." Garrett paused, just for a second. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Stryker hesitated, only for a heartbeat, then followed him. At the threshold, Garrett pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in again, sharp and clean. Behind him, Elena finally stood. She didn't call out. She didn't need to. "Garrett Cole," she said, just loud enough. He stopped. Didn't turn. "You won't stay small," she continued. "Not this time." Garrett stepped outside into the snow without responding. But his pace was slower now. Cole Auto Works didn't look like something worth saving. From the outside, it sat under a thin layer of snow that had turned gray along the edges, like the building itself had stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. The sign above the bay doors leaned slightly to the left, one bolt missing, the paint worn thin enough that the letters had started to fade into suggestion rather than statement. Garrett stood just inside the main bay, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, watching the engine block in front of him as if it might explain something. It didn't. "Either you're going to fix that," a voice said from behind him, "or you're going to stare at it until it fixes itself." Garrett didn't turn. "That your professional opinion?" he asked. Walter Keene stepped into the light from the side office, wiping his hands on a rag that had long since given up being clean, and he moved like a man who had spent his entire life around heavy machinery, slow when he could afford to be, precise when he couldn't. His hair had thinned into a permanent gray crown, but his eyes hadn't softened with age. "It's my experience," Walter said. "You've been staring at that same bolt for 5 minutes." Garrett finally glanced over. "I was thinking." Walter snorted. "That's what I'm worried about." Before Garrett could answer, the front door opened. Cold air slipped in first, followed by a figure Garrett recognized immediately without needing to look. Elena Voss didn't hesitate at the threshold. She stepped inside as if she had already decided this place belonged in her schedule. Her gaze moved once across the space, slow, deliberate, taking inventory. The cracked concrete floor, the outdated diagnostic equipment, and the stack of unpaid invoices clipped to the wall near the office door. None of it surprised her. Garrett felt that more than anything. "You found it," he said. "I told you I would," she replied. Walter looked between them, eyes narrowing just slightly. "This a customer?" he asked. "No," Garrett said. "Yes," Elena said at the same time. Walter raised an eyebrow. "That clears things up," he muttered. Elena stepped further in, stopping near the center of the bay. She didn't comment right away. Instead, she walked slowly, not touching anything, just observing. Wasn't inspection. It was evaluation. Garrett watched her do it, jaw tight. "You don't need to do that," he said. "Yes," she replied calmly. "I do." Walter leaned against the tool bench, folding his arms. "You usually let people walk in and judge your place like this?" he asked Garrett. Garrett didn't answer. Elena stopped near the far wall, where an old parts shelf stood, slightly tilted under uneven weight. A clipboard hung beside it. She reached out and flipped it over. Invoices, dates, numbers. Her eyes moved quickly. "You're behind," she said. Garrett stepped closer. "That's not new information." "No," she agreed. "It's confirmation." Silence settled for a moment. Then another voice cut in from the back. "You here to buy the place or shut it down?" The man who stepped out from behind the second bay was taller than Garrett, broader through the shoulders, though not in the way that came from training. It was weight carried unevenly, muscle layered with fatigue. His face held a permanent tension, like something had tightened years ago and never quite released. Eli Turner wiped his hands on a cloth and approached slowly, eyes fixed on Elena. "This doesn't look like either," he added. Elena turned toward him. "No," she said. "It doesn't." Walter shifted slightly, glancing at Garrett. "You going to explain?" he said quietly. "Or should I start guessing?" Garrett exhaled. "She thinks this place is worth something," he said. Walter blinked once. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not kindly either. "Well," he said, "that's new." Elena didn't react. "I don't think it's worth something," she said. "I know it is." Eli crossed his arms. "Based on what?" he asked. Elena met his gaze directly. "Based on the fact that it's still open." That landed differently. Walter stopped smiling. Garrett looked away. Eli held her eyes a second longer, then gave a small nod, like he accepted the answer whether he liked it or not. Elena turned back to Garrett. "I'm not here to offer sympathy," she said, "or advice." Garrett leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Good," he said, "because I'm not interested in either. I'm here with an offer." Walter let out a low whistle. "Now we're getting somewhere." Garrett didn't move. "What kind of offer?" Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to narrow the space between them without making it private. "I want to turn this into something else," she said. Garrett's expression didn't change. "Something that trains people who don't get second chances," she continued. "Veterans. People the system already wrote off." Eli's jaw tightened slightly. Walter straightened. Garrett remained still. "That's not what this place is," he said. "No," Elena agreed. "It's what it could be." Garrett shook his head. "You don't walk into a place like this and decide what it becomes." "I don't," she said. "You do." Another pause. Then she added quietly, "I just decide whether it survives long enough for you to try." That shifted something. Not visibly, but it moved. Garrett pushed himself upright. "You don't know what you're talking about." Elena stepped closer. "No," she said. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." She held his gaze. "I'm not investing in you." Garrett frowned. "Then why are you here?" Elena didn't look away. "I'm betting," she said, "that you won't walk away a second time." The words hit harder than anything she had said before. Walter looked between them again, slower this time. Eli didn't move at all. Garrett felt something tighten in his chest. Sharp. Immediate. "That's not your call," he said. "No," she replied. "It's yours." Silence filled the garage. Then, almost absent-mindedly, Garrett reached for something on the workbench beside him. A small metal tag. Worn, scratched, old. He hadn't meant to touch it, but his fingers had already closed around it. Elena's eyes flicked down briefly. "What is that?" she asked. Garrett didn't answer. Eli did. "That's from overseas," he said quietly. "From a mission that didn't go right." Garrett's grip tightened. "Leave it," he said. But Eli didn't. "My brother was on that mission," he continued. The room changed. Not louder, not heavier, just different. Garrett looked up slowly. Eli's expression hadn't shifted, but something behind it had. "You remember him?" Eli asked. Garrett didn't respond. He didn't need to. Eli gave a small, humorless nod. "Yeah," he said. "I figured you would." Walter's eyes moved between them, confusion settling in. "What the hell is this?" he asked. Elena didn't interrupt. She didn't move. She just watched. Garrett finally spoke. "It was a call," he said. "We were told to pull out." Eli's jaw flexed. "And you signed it," he said. Garrett didn't deny it. Silence followed. Longer this time. More permanent. Elena stepped back slightly, not retreating, just giving the moment space to exist. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "This isn't about business," she said. Garrett looked at her. "No," he said. It wasn't. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It never was. Garrett noticed it on a Tuesday morning when the delivery truck didn't show up. He didn't think much of it at first. Weather delayed things all the time out here. Snow had a way of deciding what moved and what didn't. By noon, he called. By 1, he stopped calling. By 2, he understood. They pulled out, Walter said, stepping into the office doorway with a piece of paper folded once in his hand. Garrett didn't take it. Who? He asked. Walter shrugged slightly. All of them, he said, or enough that it won't matter which. Garrett leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. That was fast, he muttered. Walter didn't reply right away. He watched Garrett the way he had for years, waiting to see whether the man in front of him would react or shut down. You want me to start making calls? Walter asked. Garrett shook his head. No, he said. Not yet. The second sign came 2 days later. The inspector didn't introduce himself when he walked in. He didn't need to. Men like that carried their authority and posture, not words. He was tall, thin, late 40s maybe, wearing a county-issued jacket that looked too clean for the work it represented. His eyes moved across the shop with a quiet kind of disapproval, like he had already decided what he would find before he found it. Routine check, he said. Garrett nodded. Of course it is. The man didn't smile. He moved through the bays slowly, clipboard in hand, noting things that had never been a problem before. Small things, minor inconsistencies, the kind that could be overlooked or weaponized. Walter followed him at a distance, silent. Eli didn't follow at all, and he stayed in his bay, working harder than necessary on a job that didn't need that level of attention. Garrett noticed that too. By the end of the week, the town had started talking. Not directly, not openly. But Garrett heard it in the way conversations stopped when he walked into the parts store, in the way people nodded without meeting his eyes, in the way the word trouble started showing up in sentences that didn't used to include it. He didn't ask who started it. He didn't need to. The third sign came from inside. Danny's gone, Walter said one morning, not looking up from the engine he was working on. Garrett stood near the tool rack, a wrench still in his hand. Gone where? Other side of the county, Walter said. Better pay. Clean shop. Garrett nodded once. Good for him. Walter glanced at him then. That's all you've got? Garrett set the wrench down. What do you want me to say? I want you to say it matters, Walter replied. Garrett didn't, because it did. Eli lasted longer than Garrett expected, longer than anyone expected, maybe. He worked without complaint, took extra shifts, covered for gaps that weren't his responsibility. If anything, he became more reliable the worse things got. That made it harder. Garrett stood in the office doorway one evening, watching Eli wipe down his station with slow, deliberate movements. "Well, you got a minute?" Garrett asked. Eli didn't look up right away. Then he did. "Yeah," he said. They stood there for a moment without speaking. Stryker lay near the entrance, head down, eyes open, watching. Garrett exhaled. "I can't keep you on," he said. He didn't soften it, didn't explain it. Eli nodded once. "I figured," he said. No anger, no surprise. That was worse. Garrett shifted his weight. "It's temporary," he added, though he didn't believe it fully. Eli gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Everything is," he said. Another pause. Then Eli stepped past him, grabbing his jacket from the hook near the door. As he walked out, he stopped beside Stryker. For a second, he hesitated. Then he reached down and rested a hand lightly on the dog's head. Stryker didn't move, didn't lean in, didn't pull away. Eli nodded once, more to himself than anyone else. Then he left. But Garrett didn't follow. That night, The garage felt larger, not emptier, just wider. Like something had been removed that had been holding the place together. Garrett stayed late, long after Walter had gone home. The lights above the main bay buzzed softly, casting a pale, uneven glow across the concrete. Tools lay where they had been left, shadows stretching longer than they should. He reached for the bottle without thinking. Cheap whiskey, the kind that didn't pretend to be anything else. He poured it into a metal cup, watched the liquid settle, then drank. No ceremony, just function. Stryker shifted slightly near the door. Garrett glanced at him. "You should go home," he muttered. The dog didn't move. The sound came from outside. Metal scraping against metal. Not loud. Not careless either. Garrett set the cup down slowly. Stryker was already on his feet. And this time, there was no hesitation. The dog moved toward the door, body low, silent. Garrett followed. He didn't grab a weapon. He didn't need one. The side door creaked open just enough to let the cold air slip in. Garrett stepped through. The alley behind the garage was narrow, shadowed, the snow uneven. Where it had been disturbed recently, he saw the movement first. A figure slipping between the buildings, fast but not fast enough. Garrett took a step forward. Stryker lunged. Not at the man. At the angle. Intercepting. There was a sharp sound. Metal again. And then a yelp. Stryker pulled back immediately, retreating to Garrett's side. The figure was gone. Vanished into the dark. Garrett crouched. "Easy," he said, voice low. Stryker's breathing had changed. Shorter. Tighter. Garrett's hand moved over the dog's shoulder, searching. He found it. A shallow cut along the upper leg. Not deep, but clean. Deliberate. Garrett's jaw tightened. He looked up into the darkness where the figure had disappeared. No pursuit. No shouting. Just understanding. Back inside, Garrett cleaned the wound in silence. No words. No reaction. Stryker lay still. Muscles tight but controlled. Eyes fixed on the open doorway. Garrett finished, wrapped the leg, then sat back on the cold floor. The bottle sat beside him. He didn't reach for it this time, not right away. Minutes passed, or longer. Time didn't matter much in spaces like this. Finally, Garrett leaned his head back against the metal of the workbench. He let out a slow breath. Stryker shifted. Not toward him. Toward the door. Lowering himself just in front of it. Body aligned. Blocking. Guarding. Garrett watched him. For a long time. "You don't get it," he said quietly. Stryker didn't move. Didn't need to. Garrett's gaze dropped. "No," he corrected himself. "You do." The dog stayed where he was, holding position, like the job had never ended. Garrett looked at the floor, then at his hands, then back at the door. Something in his chest shifted. Not relief, not clarity. Something harder. Something that didn't leave room to step back. The room was smaller than Garrett expected, not physically. It held enough chairs, enough space, enough air. But something about it compressed everything that entered. Voices, posture, even breath. The county hearing chamber wasn't designed for comfort. It wasn't supposed to be. It was a place where decisions were made under the illusion of order, where people spoke carefully because they knew every word would sit somewhere longer than they intended. Garrett stood near the back wall for a moment before taking his seat. Stryker wasn't there. That absence sat heavier than anything else in the room. Across the front, a long table stretched beneath fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly unreal. Behind it, 3 panel members shuffled papers, their expressions neutral in the practiced way of people who had learned not to show which way they leaned. Elena sat to Garrett's right, 1 chair over. She hadn't said much since they arrived. Her tablet rested flat in front of her, untouched. She didn't need it. Garrett noticed her hands. Still, controlled. That meant something. On the other side of the room, Adrian Knox stood speaking to someone Garrett didn't recognize. Late 50s, tall, composed in a way that didn't invite challenge. Knox didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Men like him shaped outcomes before anyone else knew there was a decision to be made. When Knox turned, his gaze landed on Garrett without hesitation. He smiled. Not wide, not warm. Acknowledging, like he had been expecting this. Garrett didn't return it. The hearing began without introduction. Knox spoke first. He moved to the center with the ease of someone who understood not just what to say, but how it would be received. And his tone stayed level, measured, almost reasonable. "We're not here to shut down opportunity," he said. "We're here to preserve stability." He didn't look at Garrett. Not directly. "This community depends on balance," Knox continued. "On fair pricing, on reliable service, on businesses that understand their role in the system." A pause. Then, almost casually, "When one operation begins undercutting that balance, offering services below sustainable rates, attracting labor through unrealistic promises, it creates pressure. Pressure that doesn't stay contained." Garrett sat still. He could feel the words landing around him, shaping something that wasn't entirely false, but wasn't true either. Knox turned then, finally facing him. "And when that pressure is backed by outside capital," he added, "it stops being competition. It becomes disruption." Elena didn't move. Garrett didn't either. And the first witness was a man Garrett recognized. He didn't expect that. Mark Delaney ran a smaller shop 2 towns over. They had crossed paths a handful of times. Not close, not distant either. Mark avoided Garrett's eyes as he took the stand. "I've seen customers leave," he said. "Seen prices drop in ways that don't make sense long term." He hesitated, just for a second, then continued. "It's not sustainable," he finished. Garrett watched him step down. Didn't react. Didn't argue. Because the words themselves weren't the point. The direction was. The second witness surprised him more. Walter Keene stood up. Not from the panel. From the audience. Garrett's head turned sharply. Walter didn't look at him. He walked forward with the same slow, grounded steps he used in the shop. No rush. No hesitation. The room shifted slightly, attention tightening. Walter placed both hands on the edge of the table, leaning forward just enough to be heard, without raising his voice. "I've been in that garage longer than most people in this room have held their jobs," he said. No introduction, no credentials, just fact. "We didn't drop prices to break anything," Walter continued. "We dropped them because we didn't have a choice." Knox watched him, expression unchanged. Walter's gaze moved across the panel. "You want to talk about balance," he said. "Then talk about the years that place stayed open when it shouldn't have. Talk about the people who kept it running when there wasn't enough to go around." He paused, then added, "Talk about who benefits when it finally closes." That landed. Not loud, not dramatic, but it stayed. Walter stepped back without waiting for permission. Garrett felt something shift in his chest. Not relief. Something steadier. When it was Garrett's turn, no one announced it. The chair simply looked at him. He stood. For a second, the room felt too still, too aware. He didn't move to the center immediately, just stood where he was, letting the weight settle without trying to push it away. Then he stepped forward. No notes, no preparation, just memory. "My name is Garrett Cole," he said. His voice didn't carry far, but it didn't need to. "I'm not a good man," he continued. That wasn't where people expected him to start. He saw it in the way a few heads tilted slightly. "I've made decisions," he said, "that cost people more than I can fix." A pause. He didn't look at Elena. Didn't look at Knox. Just at the table. "I left someone behind once," he said. The room tightened. "I followed orders, signed the paper, walked away." He swallowed. Not visibly, but enough. And I've lived with that every day since. Silence. No movement. Garrett lifted his head then. "Standing up doesn't fix that," he said. "It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make me right." He looked toward Knox now, but sitting down again doesn't fix anything either. Another pause. "If doing the right thing makes things worse," he said slowly, "then maybe we've been calling the wrong things right for a long time." No applause, no reaction, just a shift. Small, but real. Garrett stepped back. Didn't wait. Didn't explain. Elena stood after him. She didn't take his place. She stood beside it. "There's a pattern," she said, her voice calm, controlled. Not of disruption, of pressure. Her tablet lit briefly as she turned it, not toward the panel, but toward the room. Suppliers withdrawing simultaneously. Inspections increasing without cause. Labor being redirected. She didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse, just presented. "None of this is illegal," she continued. "Not individually." Her eyes moved once, briefly, to Knox. "But patterns don't need to be illegal to be intentional." Knox didn't react, didn't interrupt, because he didn't need to. He had already done what he came to do. The panel withdrew briefly. When they returned, the decision was delivered in neutral language that avoided taking sides. No closure of the garage, no endorsement either. Just continuation. Conditioned. Watched. Balanced. The kind of outcome that satisfied process more than people. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, just colder. Garrett stood near the steps, hands in his pockets. Elena joined him a moment later. "You didn't plan that," she said. "No," he replied. "It worked," she added. Garrett shook his head. "No," he said again. "It just didn't fail." Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "That's enough," she said. 3 months later, the garage reopened. Not new, not fixed, just functioning. Some bays stayed empty. Some names didn't come back, but the doors opened every morning. That counted. Stryker moved beside Garrett again, his gait steady now. The injury reduced to memory more than pain. They stood near the entrance one afternoon when the door opened. Garrett didn't look up right away. He didn't need to. The footsteps told him enough. Eli Turner walked in without hesitation. No greeting. No pause. He crossed the floor, set his jacket down, and moved toward his old station like he had never left. Garrett watched him. Didn't speak. Eli didn't either. After a moment, Garrett gave a single nod. Eli returned it. That was all. No apology. No forgiveness. Just presence. Stryker settled near the door again, watching both of them. Garrett looked at the space around him. The shop. The people who remained. The ones who didn't. Then he exhaled. Not relief. Not victory. Something quieter. "I didn't fix it," he said, almost to himself. Stryker didn't move. Garrett looked down at the dog, then back toward the open bay. "No," he said again, "but I didn't walk away." Sometimes the most important choice in life is not about winning, fixing everything, or being seen as good. It's simply about not walking away. Garrett didn't erase his past. He didn't save everyone. But in the moment that mattered, he stayed. And that changed everything that could still be changed. In our own lives, we will all face moments where it's easier to step back, stay silent, or let things fall apart. And maybe we can't undo what's already been lost, but we can still choose what we do next. Sometimes grace doesn't look like a miracle. Sometimes it looks like staying when leaving would be easier. If this story meant something to you, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Where are you watching from, and what stayed with you the most? And if you want more stories like this, you can subscribe and be part of this journey. May you find the strength to stand when it's hardest, and the peace that comes from knowing you didn't walk away.